this is the problem. What's happened is to our listeners and viewers is forget Morgan Smithies and his 6-game ban, which we'll talk about in a moment. Is myself and Phil pulled up before the disciplinary last week. In Phil's case, it was a case of mistaken identity on one of them. I threw him under the bus. So even worse, Paul Bennett, who was on the show and did nothing last week, he's got a ban. So we thought we need some discipline because me and Phil cannot be trusted. So who better to bring in than an actual coach from York? Kay Rollinson joins us. Kay, thank you very much for your time. I guess we ask everyone at this point, how's lockdown treating you, or whatever lockdown is these days?
I don't even feel like I've been in lockdown. I've been at work from...
Oh, you're one of those people in Port.
Yeah, I'm one of those. But I work in a college, so we're pretty full on at the moment, getting things ready for students next week.
Oh, so you've had great fun in the last 3 weeks then with everyone not knowing what they're doing.
Well, I'm part of the facilities team, so we're the ones that are on our hands and knees, marking everywhere up, etc. So it's kept us fit.
Oh, that's important. I mean, it's like Phil. Were you doing that in the shop, Phil, putting all the lines everywhere?
Well, we have had to do that, but clearly I'm banished upstairs. I'm not trusted to do anything really other than sleep. Yeah, the good lady's looking after all of that. But I do have to say, and it is a shameless plug, that we've been very busy over the last 3 days sending out copies of Tony Collins's new book, People's History of Rugby League. The perfect birthday for if you're 125 last week, which the Rugby League was. And thank you to everybody who's ordered it, and the great reaction we've had on social media of people who've started reading it as well. So yes, we're busy for probably a more productive reason than Kay at the moment.
I'm not productive at all, as you can tell. But what I have learnt this weekend is, if you are going to be sarcastic, and apparently I might be a sarcastic person, is don't make jokes about the royal family, especially Prince Harry. Now, I tweeted that he was the best of all the royals. Now, actually, it's probably true because he's one of us. He's Rugby League, him and Meghan. But when you do that, you get how many likes have I had to my tweet now from the most random people across? I mean, I'd love to get this kind of response to my. Stuff about work or stuff about something interesting, but they're still liking this tweet. Officially the best of the Royals. So far had 557 likes and 100 retweets.
Wow.
I mean, I didn't even do anything. The RFL...
Has Elizabeth Windsor retweeted it?
The RFL streak only had 988, so I'm not done bad there.
I have to say on that, and clearly it would be great to get your reaction as well. I actually think that's one of the most inspired things that the RFL stroke the World Cup have done during lockdown, that it was so natural in the way it was done. Ellery Hanley coming on and then turning the tables on the Prince and asking him some questions. I just thought that you look at the PR that the sport has got in places it wouldn't normally get it. Hello Magazine, for example, even that picked up on a non-rugby league line that he threw out that he would have come back earlier but for COVID. But virtually everybody has quoted he was doing something for rugby league. So hats off to those that arranged that, and I think it's done us the power of good.
I still saw people criticising that we didn't do enough for our birthday, but we got bloody Prince Harry involved. I mean, Kay, you'll be hoping next year with pretty much half the Women's World Cup being in York that he pops along for a game or two.
Absolutely.
What, to play?
Maybe Meghan can play for Canada, I don't know, but it's exciting times.
It is, it's really, really massive for York, and I think it sort of sets out the York plan, really. We're an up and coming team at the Knights Ladies, and to get some fantastic sort of teams into the city can only work wonders for the younger girls coming up.
Will you get to play in the new stadium? Has that been discussed at all yet? Because obviously we should ask you about whether you think it's the right decision, or if in fact it's the only decision to cancel the women's season at the moment. But have you got plenty to look forward to?
Absolutely. We have a great partnership and sort of in where we train and play now within York St John's University. But we have been told that we will be getting some games up at the new stadium. So I've actually been lucky enough to have a walk around it twice now, and I'm not just saying this because it's my club, but the stadium's absolutely brilliant. You're close to the pitch. It's just going to be a brilliant atmosphere when you're there.
Got stadium envy now. This is not good. Phil's mentioned it, Kane. Obviously, it's disappointing, but no Women's Super League season this year. No Challenge Cup. We're going to have perhaps some friendlies coming up later on in the autumn. But as time ticked on, it appeared that there wasn't going to be any other decision than the cancellation.
No, exactly. And our girls, we brought them back early this year as well, ready for pre-season, because we kind of know that fitness possibly let us down a little bit last year. And they've been chomping at the bit, ready to go. And obviously, there's not a lot we can do, is it? It's government-led. Everyone's really, really disappointed, but we kind of look for next season now.
I mean, Phil sat there at the top of the tree as a Leeds Rhino supporter. I'm Wakefield, you're York. We were finding out at the bottom of the table last year, but I know from Wakefield's perspective, they were aiming to be a lot higher this year, and I'm sure that's the same for you as well.
Absolutely. You know, we know where we needed to improve, and we kind of aimed to do that. So certainly 2 or 3 places up that league table, and they'll be some sort of a good result for us.
Well, fingers crossed everything gets back. I don't want to say normal because there is no normal anymore, but something happens next year.
Absolutely.
we get some kind of friendlies at the end. At least we're going to see some kind of rugby, hopefully, towards the end of 2020. Plenty of rugby in Super League at the weekend. 5 more games, and we'll start with Wigan and Cass actually, because Morgan Smithies has been up before the beak today, and on the rugby-league.com website they have handed him a 4-match suspension after pleading guilty to a Grade D charge of dangerous contact with James Clare. The good news is, if you've not seen it in the, I think it was the Yorkshire Post, James Clare's fine, no structural damage was the quote. Smithies also fined £500 and issued with a 2-match penalty notice for another incident in the game. So he now gets a 6-match ban, Kay, and that's a big chunk of the season he's going to miss now.
I think it kind of, you know, I watched a little bit of the clips, and he's a fiery young chap. So, you know, it might calm him down a little bit, because I'm sure that some of the older and more wiser rugby league players will be there to want to welcome him properly to Super League.
I did read something earlier today, Phil, about that. There isn't that same kind of enforcer, if you will, in the game these days that would have perhaps had a word with Smithies. Certainly not in the Castlewood team, perhaps, who would have had a word with Smithies during that game and might not have got onto that second incident.
I think they've probably got 1 or 2, but I mean, just taking a wider look at this round of matches, I just wanted to pay tribute mainly to the teams that had lost. There's a couple of ones who won who've done exceptional things, not least, you know, top of this weekend's commendations would have to be Hull. I mean, to come back from what they've suffered with 2 weeks virtually in you know, no contact with each other, to play in the manner in which they did, they'd be top of the list. But you know, St Helens didn't have a coach for 2 weeks because their staff were isolated, and you know, whilst absolutely brilliant that Hull KR held them to 12-all at half time, just, you know, to be able to come up with a disciplined finish to a game when you've barely been coached for 2 weeks is superb. I thought Salford were just the most incredibly dignified team in defeat. So much time for Ian Watson, and the fact that even before the game he was saying, we could use any number of excuses we want, but we're not going to. And clearly, again, a lack of preparation affected his team. They were the victims of a side that came out incredibly quickly and never recovered. Wakefield's stance, I think, on playing the game in the first place, when clearly, you know, there would have been a case for saying, we've had a number of players who we can't play through no fault of our own, but going ahead with the game and then standing David Fifita down. I'm sure we'll talk about that in more detail, the implications of what he's done and maybe what he should do now, and also why Wakefield felt they needed to take a stance on this matter. But the bravery at this stage, when things aren't going your way, to turn around to your best player and saying, "I'm sorry, you're more of a hindrance than a help." I think that's amazing. And I know Castleford, and we'll start with this game, and I'm sorry, it's a roundabout way of answering your question. And Darryl Powell will be disappointed that they gave away a 12-point lead. But again, for the second week running, to not know who you're playing until it's almost too late to do anything about it, I think that just we deserve to give them all the kudos. And I see loads of people on social media. I understand when you're a passionate fan of a team that you perhaps want to say that the players are rubbish and the coach has got to go and things have got to change and you don't like this and you don't like that. At the moment, and we've said it probably for the last 3 weeks on here, it's only about survival. It really isn't about the way teams are playing, and results and form lines are difficult to assess. We're trying to predict the scores of games without even knowing who's going to be in the squad. I think overall, we got a round that we could be incredibly proud of, and everybody played their part in that except Morgan Smithies, who clearly is a bit of an arse. But I wouldn't say that in front of him because he'd likely take me outside. I think Kay's right that this is a lesson for him, that he's a firebrand, and we like that in players, and it's important to a team, particularly when you're a young kid trying to prove yourself, that you do need to make a statement, but you've got to do it in a disciplined manner. You're no use to your side if you're not there for the next 6 weeks when they're going to be playing games 2-3 times a week. They need him, and now he's going to be missing till the beginning of October, and the league season will be halfway through. The next couple of rounds of the cup might well have been played, and he won't be there. So he's a young lad who perhaps the disciplinary will teach him the lesson off the field that and more experienced pro in previous days would have taught him on the field.
We had the people have been comparing it to Tommy Makinson now. I don't know which is worse, but I think in my mind, bad tackling technique or whatever you'd like to say is more dangerous than what Tommy Makinson did. Not obviously something that happens in the women's game, what Makinson did, but I guess it's you'd like to think that no players go out there to intentionally hurt someone, but they just need to be a bit more careful sometimes with their technique.
Yeah, I think I watched it back a few times really, because it's like he knew where his hand was, yet he still continued, and that was the thing that in real life, in real speed, I guess it didn't look or it wouldn't have been half as bad as what it did when it slowed down, but it's just one of those things, and it happens over in Australia and they get pinged for it, and just make sure you don't put your hand where it shouldn't be really going.
Good advice for life there, Phil.
Could you stop using tackle technique when you're talking about Tommy Makinson?
Apologies. He'll be back soon anyway.
Well, there is a wider question, which it would be clearly great to get a coach's view on. Not that Richard's view isn't any more valid. Clearly, Morgan Smithies has pleaded guilty. And he's pleaded guilty to a crusher tackle, which is something that we say we want to outlaw in the game. It's crept into it in the modern era, and there are all the issues with regards player welfare and all the things we're trying to do with no shoulder charge, concussion protocols. The next cab off the rank to eliminate from the game probably is the crusher. Now, if he pleads guilty and it's only graded as a D, then the punishment he's got does fit the crime. I think it's 3 to 5 matches, and they've given him 4. If we're serious that this is a blight that we need to take out of the sport, should we be grading it higher than a D?
It's a tricky one, particularly if we look at it from a women's perspective. Super League and the Championship guys, they get coaching. They kind of get taught how to body position is all about making sure that you're safe and the tackling players safe. It's a tricky one because you don't want to let go of somebody in a tackle, because then it kind of has a knock-on effect to you either winning or losing the floor. I don't know. I don't know if it's a tricky one, isn't it? Unless you have one on you're on the receiving end of a crusher tackle, you don't actually know how it feels. Can they be avoided? I don't know if they can sometimes when it's at full pace.
See, that's the voice of knowledge, as opposed to speculation from those that see it from the outside. I think you're right, but I do know of somebody who may have phoned over the weekend, who possibly has been on the show in the past, who does want to make example of people who are perpetrators of this tackle, and I'm only saying this because Morgan Smithies has pleaded guilty to it. It's not that it's a premeditated act. It's just that he has acknowledged that his technique on in that particular collision was wrong, and the person concerned who may or may not have made his feelings felt just said, "Got to make an example of him." Now that wasn't impersonation of him. Clearly, could have been anybody, but I think he would have favoured a longer ban.
People will be saying, where is he? There you go. He'll be back. Wigan win 30 points to 22 in the end. As you say, Phil, they were 12-0 down early on. I'd say a couple of times now, Cass have taken an early lead and let it slip. But Wigan end the weekend top of the table. I think it'd be fair to say, though, Kay, looking at things at the moment, we are 9 games into the season, but was it 4 or 5 since the resumption? It is still difficult to work out what's going on and who perhaps will be the 2 teams who contest the grand final.
Absolutely. I thought St Helens would probably be untouched this season, but looking at, Hull KI, you've got to give them absolute massive credit there, because I can imagine at half time in that game, Saints were they knew they were in a game and could possibly have been on the receiving end of a loss, really.
I think everyone's going to have a flat spot this year. They do most seasons, but when you look at the lack of not just time between matches, but there are severe restrictions on all teams about how they can prepare. So, even things like physio, massage, it's either limited or not allowed. And players I'm told, are turning up to training and they may only have 1 session a week, still stiff from the game before. So, another reason not to be too critical. And I do think that halfbacks, that we've always talked about how crucial they are to the team, and I'm pretty sure Kay will confirm the fact that her side needs to be built around a pair of halfbacks who complement each other, but also will make sure the team as a whole is in the right part of the field. Clearly Cass were playing, with Jake Truman as a virtual passenger for most of the second half because his back went again. Saints, and again, you're absolutely right, credit goes to Hull KR, but Saints did win by a fairly convincing margin. They lost Theo Farge, and a lot of the direction early on in the game went out of their play. Salford, again, just didn't look like they had somebody who could bolster Tuilola here. No disrespect to Kevin Brown, but he's been out for so long that it's just tough to be back at the standard you need to come back to. And Huddersfield, again, absolutely nothing but praise for Hull and their start to the game. But by not having a settled or experienced pair of halfbacks, just couldn't make any possession that they had pay. And I think that again, that was one of the things that I think hampered Cass in their game. But halfbacks are becoming absolutely worth their weight in gold at the moment.
Absolutely. I think, teams are quick to pick out if you've got one halfback stronger than the other. It's absolutely vital that they also complement each other. You need your direct player. So your Albert Kelly, for instance, at Hull, he's quite happy to run at that line and get his head through and any gap and he'll go. Whereas Mark Sneed, is that director, points people in the right direction. And I think you need like for like in any team, really.
And Cass, of course, did last week on the back of not knowing they were going to be playing because they were supposed to have the week off and had to come in late thanks to the Catalan Dragons, who have had the enforced 14 days off. So, again, I put on Twitter last week, well done to Cass for getting off the bench. I know they were training anyway, but as Darryl Powell said in the last couple of weeks, he almost feels they've been stitched up because they've had every game change about who they're going to play. They've still got to fit in this game against Hull in the Challenge Cup. And he admitted afterwards they were poor, and they'll be hoping to change that this week when they take on Salford, which is an interesting game. That one is the early kickoff on Thursday. Salford off the back of that defeat to Leeds. And the interesting news here, Phil, is the timing of the announcement at 9 levels, which we all knew. I thought this had been announced already for some reason, probably because it was leaked in the press so long ago. But he's off to Casper next season, and they've announced that days before they play each other, oddly.
Good. The more animosity, fake or otherwise, that we can stoke up, that's exactly what keeps this sport going, and we don't do it enough. And if that adds a line on a report, if it creates more interest in a Thursday game at 2:30 in the afternoon, good. I'm sure that clearly Salford have recruited for 9 levels not being there. They bought Morgan Escaray. Cass, I don't think have made any secret that Gareth O'Brien is only there until the end of the season. And as you say, not exactly the word on the streets, but Cass rumour mill was abounding with the fact that Evalds was coming in to be the long-term replacement for Jordan Rankin. Good, announce it. And I wouldn't be surprised if this had been agreed between the two teams that this was when it was going to be announced. And we're adding some feeling to the match. Good. Let's do more of it. Let's have some, players and coaches coming out saying, next time Morgan Smithies is due to play, whoever he comes back against, let's have some gnarly forward from whoever it is that they're playing saying, I'll teach him a lesson. Don't you worry about that.
Like he's wanting me next season when the Women's Super League's back. He's going to want me to go on and before Wakefield play York, say, "Oh, York are rubbish," and wind you up or something. And I can see it backfiring. That's what it's all right for. Nodding. It's all right for these, people to. If I say anything, it always goes wrong. Salford again, off the back of no time to train whatsoever. I mean, obviously, your players are not professional, okay, but they train when you have your scheduled training. If you went 2 weeks before a game without able to train properly, you'd have no hope, would you? No one would.
What's that? Sorry, you were breaking up a little bit then.
I was just saying, Salford playing that game off the back of their 14 days in self-isolation. Whether it's a professional team or yourself at York, it's going to be very tricky to be able to have that cohesiveness to be able to play.
Absolutely. It's really difficult anyway to turn around sometimes, and particularly for the women. Some clubs get a lot of help in terms of recovery and massage and stuff like that. But I remember when I played, and it was one of the reasons that I kind of retired, was that play on a Sunday, the following Saturday I was still struggling to be able to lift my arms up. Recovery and everything is key, and especially at the level of contact that these guys are going into. Their bodies must be battered.
And Salford suffered 4 major injuries during the game, and at a time again where you've got limited preparation time, you've got very, very little training time, irrespective of whether you stood down or not. Nobody's doing more than maybe a session or 2 between each game. You get 4 injuries during a match, which basically wipes out your entire bench. There's not a lot you can do about it, and clearly I'd like to pay credit to the way Leeds played. I would, wouldn't I? But there were 2 stats that stood out from this game for me. One was the astonishing defensive work rate of Luke Yates, who made 58 tackles in just over 62 minutes on the field, which, in a team that's been beaten by 50, it's easy to overlook effort like that. That is astonishing. And for Leeds, young forward Michalewski, and I think we're all hoping that some of the youngsters will get the opportunity to shine at all clubs. That if there is the slightest positive about playing so many games, it's that it is going to thrust the younger player more into the limelight, and those who can accept that challenge and take it on have a really big future in the game. He looks lean, he looks aggressive. The try that he scored was fantastic, but he made 175 metres, and he wasn't on for the full 80 either. And again, for a young kid against an experienced Salford pack, I think you could, in every game on both sides, you can pick out players who've done exceptional things. And Leeds were very fast early on. I think blew Salford away in the knowledge that they hadn't been playing. But if you do follow the fortunes of blue and amber, then I think it would have been very switch off in the second half, and certainly for the first 10 or 12 minutes of that second half, Salford were in the ascendancy. And I think the fact that Leeds found a way to turn that round would be encouraging for Richard Agar, and they finished pretty strongly.
Richie Miller, as a veteran player, he's doing well, Kay, just to have to adjust to a new position at the moment. A hat-trick for him at the weekend, and certainly impressing in Leeds colours at the moment.
Absolutely. I think he's just taking these opportunities when he gets them. And obviously, the more and more sort of effect that he has an impact on a game, he's still going to be there knocking on the door to hopefully get a starting position back.
He's doing well, Phil. He got a lot of criticism when he moved there, but people misread what Scully said, I think, at the time. It was never about him, but about the position he was filling. Speaking of positions being filled, 2 new players in at Leeds. Well, one new one and one old one. James Harrison and Brett Ferris is back from Featherstone, because they're not doing anything at the minute, so they may as well get some game time.
I reckon this is the start of a lot of Championship players being given an opportunity by Super League teams. Clearly, they're not going to be playing this year. They're available. One is an experienced guy who absolutely knows the system inside out. You can bring him in without any lack of continuity, so that makes sense. The other one is a young kid who would relish the opportunity. That makes sense. I just think this is the start of a lot of Championship players getting an opportunity at Super League level. Squads are being tested to beyond their limit, and whilst we say we want to see young kids coming through, again, Kay would know this better than either of us, but there has to be a right time to bring a new player in, and a young player, it's not quite as easy as just saying, well, you got all these young academy lads that are talented, just throw them all in there. You can do more damage than good. And for this weekend's games, Leeds aren't playing either 2 Featherstone lads, because they literally have just arrived. But Jared O'Connor is in the squad, who is one of these young kids. Now, he's going to benefit from having a guy like Brett Ferris around the place. So I can only see positives, and I know Leeds have taken a bit of stick about Ferris coming back, but to me it just makes absolute sense, because if you're the coach and you can bring a guy in who knows the systems, the structures, the calls, the players, and he's only there for a month, and even if he doesn't play, his influence around the place is to bring on a Michalewski type player. Great. What have you got to lose? He's coming on a part-time basis. More clubs should be, York, for example, who are putting together a really good squad of players. They've got 2 or 3 that could be helping out a Hull or a Hull KR at the moment. Absolutely. But bring it on. Let more Championship players have a chance in Super League this year.
I mean, the good news for Jared O'Connor is he doesn't look like his dad. So that's one positive for him.
I can't imagine how loud his dad is going to get if he's commentating when Jared comes on. You'll be able to hear it in your living room, never mind at the ground, with a microphone.
We were actually asked, let me go through the tweets, and I was asking people what we were going to talk about today. And it was, someone actually asked me on Messenger about young players, and if they're, there it is, in God's own county, so it must be someone from Yorkshire. Could you discuss on the podcast the crisis the game will face if youngsters don't get the opportunity? It appears Super League clubs are cancelling contracts expecting the players to train for no pay. Well, I don't know about that, but young players getting a chance, as Phil says, it is difficult. In Women's Super League, obviously, there are a lot of young players get their chance at an earlier age in the men's game. But it is difficult to throw them into an environment where they're up against players who've got plenty of experience and getting paid plenty of money as well.
Absolutely. I think it's probably going to be in their favour a little bit now, well, when rugby gets back, that there's the reserve fixtures. It gives them an opportunity to play against those experienced players that might be coming back from injury and stuff like that. So, it gives them an opportunity to step up, particularly for us. So under 16s obviously can't play Women's Super League. As soon as you're 16, you can make that step up. there's no in between there. So the women, they don't get to kind of come up against a reserve team, etc. And we've done it with 2 of our girls that have come up through our Excel. I think Rebecca played in the Wakefield game away last year for us, and it's a big baptism of fire for them. You know, they come off and they actually don't realise how tough it was going to be. Probably they don't particularly shed tears, but it's a welcome to women's rugby. It's not girls' rugby anymore.
And it's the same for the men, isn't it, Phil? As you're saying, you don't want to throw them in too early unless you have to, I guess.
It's the most unforgiving of sports, and not only do you need a greater aerobic capacity to play at a higher level, but nothing can prepare you, even in the wrestle room in training, for the physicality of the sport. And I'm looking at, again, apologies for the lead slant, but I'm looking at a kid like Tom Holroyd. You know, Tom's 18 and he's played in the last 2 weeks, and physically he looks the part. But you can tell that after about 10 minutes on the field, that if you are taking a relentless amount of hits from guys who are a lot bigger than you, a lot older than you, whose timing is, probably more established compared to your enthusiasm to keep wanting to run the ball at them, it takes a massive toll off you. And it does in terms of recovery, that you can't necessarily play every single week because you're just not used to that kind of thing. And I do think that our correspondent who wanted an answer, that I think it's a fine balance. I think, yes, some young kids mature at a level that is a quicker rate than others. Some play in positions where you can ease them in a little bit more gradually. But if you're playing in the front row, you have to be a special breed to play 10, 11 games on the trot and not need to be withdrawn for your own safety.
I mean, the good news is Wakefield have announced their 21-man squad for the weekend, and I'm not in it, which is the positive. We'll talk.
Must have been close.
Well, I was thinking I might have to buy some boots from somewhere. Squad number 41 ready to go, nearly my age as well. As you've mentioned, people coming into the game, the game's faster because of these new rules. Kay, what do you make of the lack of scrums at the minute?
Mixed on it, really. You know, I'm probably like everybody else. You know, that you can line people up from scrums. You can put a few moves on, etc. But I think it makes the game a lot more exciting to watch. And I think as the weeks are going on, everyone's adapting to the speed of the game, which I think, you know, in a few weeks' time, scores will be getting closer because people have adapted to it more. And I think the games at the weekend kind of proved that teams are actually getting used to this no scrums, the 6 again rule. For us in the women, I don't know, it might be good. At least we can get numbered off in defence.
I tell you what, they've got to start out, Phil, is make sure they've got a hooter that works for the 6 again. Because I think we went through about 3 different noises at the weekend at Warrington.
I'm glad you said that, because I thought it was something else for a while, and it was more to do with the indigestion in the commentary team. But we do need something that clearly indicates. But I mean, again, I'm not a huge follower of stats like that. But is it just my imagination? I know you two watched a lot of the games this weekend. Are we getting less 6 to go? So is it because the players are adapting? Is it the referees are now a little bit more certain about what they are going to penalise and what they're not? We seem to have more continuity this weekend and even lesser stoppages, and that's one of the reasons, and it could be an age thing. I might be tempted to bring the scrums back when it's safe to do so, purely from the variety angle. I think if you've got 6 to go and, as Kay was saying, you're naturally speeding up the game, then sometimes to slow it down, even on 5 or 6 occasions during the 80 minutes, to have a scrum. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe we are missing that, and it does become a little bit one-dimensional without it. But I think the jury's still out on scrums, and even now the Aussies are talking about not having them. So if they're talking about it, clearly it ain't going to happen.
Scrums where the ball goes in the middle and the forwards push.
That'll never catch on.
That kind of thing. Remember them from the old one? When I used to play at school, we used to have to do that. a long time ago. Then stuck out on the wing. Have we talked about enough about Leeds? Yeah, we have. They were good. Hull Kingston Rovers, as you mentioned earlier, Kay, they were impressive in the way they are swashbuckling and full of endeavour going forward. Tony Smith's side have taken things, it seems, the right way in terms of there's no relegation, there's no jeopardy for them. They can go out there and express themselves, and yes, they might not win, but at least they're having or entertaining the public along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that Tony Smith does, you know, he always encourages his teams to kind of promote the ball. And I'm a black and white. So saying positive things about Rovers is breaking my heart a little bit. But they actually played some really good rugby from the stuff that I saw.
I can see why you've chosen this week to come on. I'm a black and white. What I would say about Hull KR is incredibly unfortunate for the injury to Adam Quinlan. He's so important to offer that dimension at the back because you can't buy pace. He's very elusive. Clearly is a threat from the back. And to lose him after he'd scored and pulled him back into the game a little bit, and it looks like a serious break, and he's coming out of contract, and the amount of injuries he's had in his career, that could really have thrown him off course. And the fact that it didn't, I think, is testament to how well they played this week compared to the game against Warrington. There was a fair bit of let's move the ball for moving the ball's sake, and they made too many mistakes by their own admission. They were a little bit more disciplined against St Helens. They did still want to move the ball, but there was a little bit more. If we have to take a drive in and settle it down, we will. I'm a big fan of George Lawler. I think he's an unsung hero in their team. Matt Parcell caused some problems. They've got a nice balance, but there's a lot of inexperience in the team as well, and clearly a lot of injuries. Clearly they haven't played for 3 weeks, and also clearly the fixture list does them no favours because they've got Wigan at short turnaround this week, then they've got to play Saints again. And whilst nobody is benefiting from the fixtures and they have to be what they have to be, that is tough for Hull KR. That run of 3 games when you haven't played for 3 weeks is difficult. But yeah, I just wish Tony Smith would have a shave. And I am not a man for sartorial elegance, as you can tell.
Where's your slalom lager jumper, Phil? I've been missing it. As a weekly part of this programme, it seems at the moment, is to praise Alex Walmsley. And here we are again. I don't know what's happening, Kay. They've got all this talent in that team. Regan Grace, who scores tries from everywhere. Tommy Makinson when he's on the field. And Alex Walmsley, big old prop forward with a broken neck, is their top try scorer. What's going on?
He just puts himself about the pitch, doesn't he? He's one of those old school prop forwards, I think, and he's just a battering ram. And if you put yourself in a position to be available to get the ball, then you deserve to score tries.
I think it says a lot about his fitness coming out of lockdown. How tough it must be for the naturally bigger player. When there'll be a limit to even what equipment they could have been using, even if they took the odd weights bar home with them. He has come back looking absolutely the butcher's dog of Super League. Astonishing self-discipline to do that. I think we said it last week when clearly we weren't insulting people, that he is arguably the best player in the world at the moment. And yeah, let's all argue about how good the Aussies are up front in the NRL, and there's some brilliant players, but I'd pick Walmsley against any of them at the moment. I also thought it was really interesting how good James Roby was when switched to scrum half. That is, when you played the bulk of your 500 games as a wily, scheming hooker, to then say, well, actually, we'll let the youth of Aaron Smith take that role. You just play 7 in place of Theo Farge. And by the way, if you can throw the rainbow ball that leads to the all-important try. How good is James Roby? That's a rhetorical question because we all know he's brilliant.
I'm looking forward to October the 1st when Wigan and Saints play at midnight to get around the government guidelines to have fans there. People only about 2:30 on a Thursday afternoon. What about midnight rugby league? Perfect for the audience in Malaysia or whatever, as our colleague Martin Kellner would say about his show on the radio. But whether Saints play at midnight or not, well, I think you can put them on the pitch at any time and they'll look good, as they did. Level at half time, it come out 32-18 winners. Who've they got this weekend? Huddersfield, who, well, I mean, I hope you weren't watching last week, Kay, and I hope Simon Wolfer's not watching now. We all wrote off Hull FC last week. Well, they're coming back off this positive coronavirus test, and we don't know what that's going to do to them. No training, no games for weeks, and here they come, and they absolutely battered Huddersfield. Okay, you could have helped for more as a Hull supporter.
Absolutely, I was shouting at the TV because even I was thinking, oh, I'm not sure what our chances are this week. We had a fantastic first half, and then I'm sure Andy Last will be looking and thinking we only scored 3 points. I think was it 3 points in that second half. I know that Mark Sneed losing him was big, but we're definitely going to have to find somebody to fit in that gap for a few weeks, because once he'd gone off again, I know Carlos is pretty good at filling in it, sort of in the halves, but we need somebody that's going to be able to boss us about.
If only you had somebody called, maybe, I don't know, Connor, who could come in and fill that slot.
Absolutely.
What's interesting, I think, and clearly I defer to the Hull fan on this, is I actually think Andy Last will have got more out of the second half than the first half. I think they front-loaded their game in the knowledge that, fitness would be an issue purely because they haven't been able to train for 2 weeks. So he'd have been absolutely delighted that they were 28-0 up, and that was clearly the game plan. Go try and get them early, and then, but to defend that so well for virtually a full half, and rarely look under too much threat, would be massive for him. What would I think the most interesting question to ask a Hull fan at the moment is, to me, there seemed a lot more dynamism about the team, and there was some concern before the game that, again, a lot of young players were being thrown in, all of whom have played before, so they're not academy players. They know their role in the first team, but there was a clutch of 4 or 5 of them that were played ahead of more experienced guys who may still be coming back from the effects of COVID and being in isolation. But it seemed a different Hull team in that first half. Now, the classic example that everybody's picked on is having Jordan Johnson at hooker instead of Danny Houghton. But Johnson was quicker out of dummy half than Houghton, and that's not saying anything about the importance of Houghton to his team and how impressive he's been over his career and how much work he does in defence. But on attack, they looked a different team with youthful exuberance. Would that be a fair assessment?
I think so, yeah, definitely. And the faster you are out of the tackle and out to play the ball, it makes you go forward automatically. You're not on the back foot. Brad Fash, I've been a critic of Brad Fash sometimes, but I thought he had a decent game up front, did Brad. He didn't make too many mistakes. And the only time sort of we looked like we were going to fall back into like the old Hull FC from sort of 2 or 3 weeks ago was when we were just trying to push that ball, take the tackle. You don't have to score off everything, set up and go again. And that kind of creeped in towards the back end of the game, but also the Fanua Simbin in. I think we did well to defend 12v13 at times.
After a couple of narrow defeats for Huddersfield, Phil, that was a big one and a surprise one. We all tipped Huddersfield last week. We're not going to sit back and say we didn't. Bit of concern for them. Again, you look at the fixtures this week, they've got St Helens, so it doesn't get any easier for them.
I think the concern would be something that Simon Wolf had said, who, an extremely honest guy, somebody who doesn't pull any punches after a game. And I think he said that it was almost as if his players had decided that they couldn't win the game when they heard that Aidan Caesar had been ruled out late on. And we were talking about halfbacks earlier in the programme, and clearly he ended up with a young and inexperienced pair who I think by their own admission would say they didn't have as much influence on the game as perhaps they would have liked, that some of the option taking wasn't the best under pressure. Now, as young guys, they'll learn from that, and that's all part of why we want younger players in the teams. But it's why maybe you do need to start with your league Askills and Aidan Caesars, because you also have to put yourself in with a chance of winning the game. And I just didn't think that Huddersfield posed enough threat. Some of their online defence is really commendable. They're a different Huddersfield to the one that we saw last year. They look a little bit more resilient when they're on their own line, and they showed that in the second half. But they just didn't have a creative enough spark. Adam O'Brien is a real hard-working hooker in the same way that Danny Houghton is. But if things aren't going for you, then you don't have enough variety to change that up, I don't think. I guess they just need to find a bit more of a creative spark when they lose some of the first choice players that are in the pivotal roles.
Certainly, creative spark who was on form at the weekend was Blake Austin. Hat-trick of tries for Warrington as they shut out Wakefield 36-0. We'll talk about the concern of Wakefield not scoring for the last 2 weeks in a moment. But Blake Austin back and looking like the player Kay was at the start of last season.
It just looks like he's having fun and enjoying it. And is it because the game's slightly faster? Who knows? For anyone to score 3 tries in a game, it's a massive feat. So he definitely looks like he's enjoying himself.
I think he said something really interesting after the game, and we've sort of hinted at it at points during the programme. But people have said, and I think we might even have said it and I confess in our ignorance, particularly from my point of view, that the partnership between him and Gareth Widdop is taking a lot of time to emerge, and as he pointed out, and of course as soon as he says it, you suddenly think, well, obviously, they went away on tour, but they didn't play together as a partnership. When they came back off tour, they were given an extended time off because obviously their season had finished so late, which meant they didn't do any work really together. They then have Widdop injured just as they're about to start training to play games. So again, the partnership doesn't get any chance to develop. And then after 2 or 3 games, we have a lockdown for 5 months, and they're basically waving at each other over a Zoom and not training together. And yet we expect, Widdop and Austin to be the all singing, all dancing, highly expensive partnership that Warrington have wanted to put together. For the first time this week, it did look like they knew what each other's roles were. And, Widdop sort of controlled the game and kicked when he needed to, and he's running the ball a little bit more. And Austin got the free role. Exactly what, Kay was talking about earlier, that you want your halfbacks to be compatible as a pair and bring different qualities to the role, and I think that does make Warrington, who've won 5 now on the bounce, something of a threat. I still think there's a lack of genuine pace, which obviously that is no disrespect at all to the likes of Josh Charnley and Tom Lynham and Toby King, but I just think that they haven't got somebody who is an out and out Regan Grace type speedster. But in terms of keeping a team to nil, no matter who it is, that's a big feat.
I don't want to misquote Steve Price, even though I was in the press conference. I can't remember the exact quote, and it's not in the papers, but he was saying something along the lines of perhaps takes about 8 or 9 games to get a half-back partnership working well together. Widdop and Austin are getting in that direction. I guess it's time Warrington needed, and it's paying off for them now, Kay.
Absolutely, and they just got to kind of keep the fingers crossed that neither of them pick up an injury. There's always that. Then who's going to fill in the role? They're just starting to gel together. Like you say, people will get an understanding of what they need to do in and around those players. So staying fit is vital for those, I think.
I think the interesting thing still for Warrington is how they bring Matty Ashton in, because clearly they don't have pace, but they do have pace. It's how they decide to use it, and he's now just come back on the bench. I still think there is a case for saying put Ratchford at loose forward and Matty Ashton at fullback, and then I think you might just have all the qualities you need to trouble any team in any given game.
A word on Ratchford as well. He's 8 points away now from 1,000 for Warrington, which is not a bad return in his 246 appearances to date for the Warrington Wolves. On the opposite side, Wakefield have got no players, hence why.
Would you like us to leave now while you have a little sob?
Oh, okay, it's okay. I got over it quickly. Nilled again. As Chris Chester said in the post-match, though, Max Jarrett played well at fullback, very safe. I think in his best position. I'm the Max Jarrett fan club, though, so I'll get accused of being biased on that one. But it is a concern to lose again. A lot of the fans are upset about things, but I'm very much of the opinion this season is very much getting through it. There's no jeopardy. Just get through the games. I know people want to see that. I want to see my team win every week, but there are bigger fish to fry. Speaking of big fish, it throws itself together. David Fifita, interesting. His standing down from the squad at Wakefield. It reminds me, in completely different circumstances, of when going into the £1 million game against Bradford all those years ago, Wakefield stood down Tim Smith and Kevin Locke, as I say, for completely different reasons. They didn't have to do that. Michael Carter took the decision to do so, and it obviously had no bearing on the results whatsoever. He apparently doesn't want to wear a GPS device, took it off at half-time in the game against Catalans. They're obviously told to wear these for important track and trace reasons at the moment. Forget all the stuff about how many metres a player's doing or whatever. And listening to Chris Chester in a press conference afterwards, it's a very interesting situation. I don't know what else to say about it, Phil, because he's obviously a very popular figure and has been in his time at Wakefield, but fans turn quickly and they've started to do that.
I just think he owes an explanation. Number one, to the fans who've stood by him and made him a cult figure, and to a greater or lesser extent have influenced the kind of contract he's on at the moment. I think he owes a massive explanation and an apology to his teammates. This is the toughest time that any team is going to face in terms of getting ready to play matches. We've already talked about some of the restrictions that they're under at the moment, and you need a unity and a sense of purpose to get through this. And clearly, it's the behaviour of a maverick, which, as I said right at the very beginning, I applaud the Wakefield club for standing up to him. I think Chris Chester said he's the highest paid player, which again, if I was a player and I'd taken a pay cut, I would be annoyed that the guy who is still the highest paid player didn't want to muck in with the rest of us. But I think it's all about team spirit at a time like this. And if sides are going to grind out wins when they're not playing well, everybody has to front up and play together. And if you've got a guy that, for, unless we hear otherwise, I would say a spurious reason, doesn't want to be part of this squad at the moment, then leave him on the outer. Well, what's his end game, Rich? No other Super League team is gonna buy him, because A, he's an expensive luxury at the moment, and nobody can afford that in the current economic climate. With the greatest respect to him, no NRL team's going to pick him up at the moment. He's not in good enough form that they would even be looking at him. So I don't know, he's trying to hide something maybe, but I just applaud Wakefield for the more difficult decision of standing him down. At this stage, if it was me, easy to say on the outside, I'd be saying, for all the time that you're not prepared to wear your GPS tracker, we don't actually even want you around the club, that we're trying to do something else, and that kind of behaviour is incredibly disruptive. And he's effectively isolated. If he's breached his contract, I probably wouldn't be paying him either. And I have every sympathy for Michael Carter and Chris Chester in managing this situation. But David Fifita, to me, owes the two most important people, the fans and his fellow players, a massive explanation why he thinks this is appropriate.
I should point out, I know nothing other than what you all know at home and what you've heard. I think it's always interesting when clubs make statements and coaches say things in press conferences that you sit back and think, that's an interesting thing to say. because they don't have to say anything about anything, as we well know. So when people say things, they're saying them for reasons, and you have to work out what those reasons are yourself at home. How important is team spirit, Kay? Obviously, no one's getting paid at York City Knights, ladies, but I don't want to say bad apple because people assume that I'm saying Fifita's when I'm not saying that. But if you have someone who goes against what others do in your team, how do you deal with it?
It's one thing that we've never had to sort of approach at York. One thing that we pride ourselves on is kind of team spirit, you know, morale. You know, it's a well-known fact that we've won one game last season, one game the season before, was on the end of some quite high nils. But our girls just kind of, every single one of them leads by example. They all buy into kind of what we want as a club. I just think, you know, if we had somebody that was refusing to do what was asked of them, it just sends out the wrong message to the younger players. You know, is if it's all right for a senior player, the most senior one sort of, and the most well-paid one to get away with things, does that basically mean that, do you know what, this 18-year-old kid that's knocking on the door to get in can also do the same thing? So I take my hat off to Wakefield for doing that, because it can't have been an easy decision, but it just has a bad effect on everybody throughout the team.
It's just not nice, Phil, is it? You know, we want to talk about it. In the situation that everyone has been affected, whether you're a player or whether you work behind the scenes, or anyone in the world has been affected by what's going on at the moment, and we're all having to live by rules and things that we've never had to do before, wearing masks and standing 2 meters away from people, and not everyone can do that, and everyone wants to do that, and I don't want to say people are idiots, but there's at least one rugby league personality on social media who's very anti-mask wearing, who, you know, is an idiot. People, the future of the sport, and this is not hyperbole, is on the line at the moment with this kind of thing, isn't it? He's frozen. But you're a good.
You hinted at.
He's back.
You hinted at it in what you were saying, that handled and otherwise. Well, it could have been that.
We can't get decent now. Why? Oh, hang on, Phil. Start again, Phil. You keep breaking up.
Did I? Was I doing the old
Norman Collier? Yeah.
Norman Collier.
One for the younger listeners. Yeah. I
was going to say, I think you hinted at it there. There are two ways that this could have been handled by Wakefield. You know, and there could be some genuine issues that David Fifita has. And they could have decided that between the statement, you know, could have made him unavailable. But they decided to issue the statement that said, "We are standing you down." And Chris Chester didn't mince his words in the press conference. So clearly, the breakdown seems to be from David Fifita's side. And if it comes out later in the week after we've recorded this that there's a major reason why he couldn't do it, then we'll be the first to apologise. But I just think the fact that the club have come out and suspended him themselves, and that the club have basically given the exact reason why they believe he is not playing, and it is such an important issue with tracking and tracing, that there can only be one side to this, and he would appear to be on the wrong one.
Well,
I've just realised that I mentioned that both Morgan Smithies and David Fifita may be in the wrong. In a minute, I might be going to bolt the front door.
Yeah. After the last week we've had, you're just never going to learn, Phil, are you? Maverick. You're a maverick. You're the David Fifita of this programme. Just sell some T-shirts on Instagram like he does.
I don't think it would have been too big for me, to be fair.
One can only hope that if I was a player who'd chosen to do something that, I don't know, if I had an agent who did a podcast or something, they could go and explain it for me, but I don't know if that would happen or not. Before we get on to the predictions and look ahead to this week's fixtures and trying to work out what's been going on in the world, I just want to touch on something from last week to clear something up. Did mention about the current Black Lives Matter campaign and stuff. People may have misconstrued my words that it wasn't being taken seriously. That's not what I intended. My point was that we have had things in the past that have been taken seriously at the time and then appear to have been washed aside, and I'm hoping that's not the case with this. That was my point. As to the incidents at the Challenge Cup semi-finals last year of alleged racism, both were investigated, and they couldn't find the fan who was accused of the alleged racism. The club tried to do it and the RFL, but no one could find him, so nothing happened to that, and that's why nothing was ever released. So I think that cleared up. Elsewhere, I know what I want to talk about before we get on to everything else, unless we can think of anything else. You must be proud, Kay, of one of your players who's been heavily involved in that. Well, I say heavily involved, started the campaign to sort out this Irish Rugby Union shirt nonsense, where they, rather than putting players in shirts, they put models in shirts instead. So one of your players started a campaign, and it's, well, it seems to have worked because they've reneged on that and gone back to actually using players instead of models.
Well, I don't even know what they were thinking about in the first place. Surely they didn't expect it to go unnoticed and none of us female players to kind of want to do anything about it. You know, hats off to Georgia. Georgia is a fantastic person in general, and she just felt that it doesn't matter whether you look feminine, it doesn't matter what you look like, you should just use your players to promote your female kit. You know, Super League club have done it, and like I'm sure Championship clubs would. Why anyone would use models is beyond me. I don't know. Surely it's not going to sell more shirts.
You wouldn't think so, would you? But well, I don't know anything about advertising. I don't know anything about advertising. Well done to Georgia, a campaign which has worked, and very quickly as well. It didn't take too long for Canterbury to completely backpedal on that one, which was good. So it's a positive.
The very least they can do now is send York City Knights ladies a complete set of Canterbury kit, I would have thought.
I just think everybody kind of got hold of this. So women's rugby union, absolutely every sport, doesn't matter what sport it is, you know, let's get on and just say, you know, we're worthy of being advertised in our own playing kit.
Samuel's asked us who we think's doing the best recruitment in the Championship, so I bought the paper to see who's been signing players, because that's all it's full of at the moment. I see Aaron Murphy's gone to Bradford. Widnes seem to send out tweet after tweet for the last few weeks about signing players, so they seem to be making a big tilt of it for next year. I guess we'll know when everyone's done their recruitment, Samuel. I mean, that's a cop-out answer from me. I haven't got a clue. But at least it seems everyone's doing stuff.
If the autumn competition takes place, we'll have a look at it.
The autumn competition.
The Joseph Platt Trophy.
Was that trophy outside the George Hotel where you can have your photo taken? Let's have a look at the photo. No, it wasn't there, was it? No, sadly not. Never mind.
Was the Mackerson Trophy there?
That and the Captain Morgan Rum Trophy. But the Yorkshire Cup wasn't there. Where was the Yorkshire Cup's there in Huddersfield? And it wasn't there. Benji Marshall, is he coming to the to Super League, Phil?
New Zealand Warriors.
New Zealand Warriors. Oh, there you go.
Swan song in the club that's close to his heart. Depending, of course, if their new coach wants him.
And we must all be looking forward to this weekend. Sonny Bill Williams making his first Rugby League appearance since whenever it was, because obviously Super League doesn't count. When the Sydney Roosters take on the Canberra Raiders, and that's on telly, excitingly on Saturday.
I think one of the things we can say is it Channel 9 or Channel 10? One of the stations over there that covers the Rugby League. They've got a special camera just on Sonny Bill should he get on the field. That just shows you how of a personality, how important he is to the sport, and we shouldn't underestimate that, because there aren't too many people they do that for. The last person they did was Jared Hayne when he came back from his stint at the NFL. So more power to Sonny Bill. There's a meeting tomorrow, which clearly when people listen to this, they may even know the outcome of, if it's made public, as to whether Toronto are going to be readmitted to Super League for next year. If they are, and clearly a lot of people will see their finances before we ever do, I just hope they can bring Sonny Bill back with them.
If they'd done that, Sonny Bill Williams camera for that first game at Headingley, they'd just had Danica in the background for the whole match. She was following him around like a stalker. Super League is back on Thursday. 2:30 kickoff. This is the first afternoon kickoff in a weekday since the 3-day week and the BBC Floodlit Trophy was played in daylight. Salford Red Devils.
What, since Bramley won the Floodlit Trophy in the afternoon?
Congratulations, Bramley. Salford Red Devils versus Castleford Tigers. How's this one going to go, Phil?
I just feel for Salford at the moment. I think they're carrying too many injuries. Haven't had a significant time to change too much from what was a heavy defeat. To make the grand final, just need to hit back. They've had a couple of weeks where they think
you just sit here in silence while Phil's internet is terrible. What did you say, Phil? Then Castleford.
Cast by 12.
Cast by 12. Cast by 12.
Never mind the explanation.
Kay, what do you make of this one?
I just think Castleford are coming on stronger and stronger each week, so it's definitely cast for me.
I'm going to go with the Tigers as well by 8. That's followed at 6 o'clock. Much better time for people who have jobs. By Hull Kingston Rovers versus Wigan. Go on, Kay, you can go first on this one with the your rival side in action.
Yeah. I think most people will opt for Wigan, so I go Wigan by 10.
Yeah, I just think they can grind out a winner. I'll go Wigan by 14.
Wigan by 14. I'm going Wigan by 18. Zooming through these before Phil completely disappears. The game of the week, 8:15 kickoff. Bad news for the newspapers because we all pick them up on a Friday morning. Wakefield Trinity playing at home against the Leeds Rhinos. Getting that away dressing room, Phil.
Yeah, I would. I think this will be close to overperform against Leeds, so I'll go Leeds, but closer than some might think.
What do you think of this one, Kay?
I just think looking at form and the way that Leeds played last week, you've definitely you'd be struggling to back Wakefield, unfortunately. So I'm going to go Leeds by 20.
Wakefield by 2. Friday, 6 o'clock. Obviously, after 6 o'clock in Leeds, everyone starts to get on the internet. Huddersfield versus St Helens, Phil.
Which is strange. I've got all my going, whatever that means. Yeah, I think Saints are a little bit more vulnerable than they were a couple of weeks ago because of obviously the schedule that everybody's under at the moment. But unless Huddersfield get Aidan Caesar back there, I'm Saints by 12.
Okay, what do you think?
Ooh, I was just going to say Saints by 16. I think they'll beat them easy.
I'm going to go 18. So we're all with Saints by a decent amount there. And closing the weekend off on Friday. Geez. What we're going to do all week, 8:15 kickoff, Warrington versus Hull. Go on, Kay, you can go first on this one.
I've got to back my own team, haven't I? But it always scares me. I think back to that last game when Warrington were at KC and absolutely walloped us. So I think we're going to go. I reckon it'll be 25-24. FC.
25-24, an exact score, Phil.
The round, I think Kay's like to highlight that the last time these two sides met was the end of the Lee Radford. Hull have got a point to prove. Warrington have got to prove to themselves that they are worthy this year. Forward to this probably as the game of the round. I'll go Warrington 2.
Warrington by 2. I'm going to go Warrington by 4. So that's the predictions. Slightly broken up. Kay, thank you very much for your time, for taking the call and speaking to us. And fingers crossed there's some rugby for the York City Knights women later this year. If not a successful 2021 building up to that World Cup. We'll probably see you in York for that at least. Phil, thank you as ever. If you're still there, he's still there. He's nodding.
I wore it this time. It didn't make any difference.
People will now be complaining on the internet that they've not been able to hear us, but which is interesting because last week they were complaining they could hear us. We'll be back again for another edition of 4020. Not long.